The Book of Hosea is a precise, legally binding event. It is built on the legal architecture of an ancient Near Eastern suzerainty treaty, operating as a covenant lawsuit known in Hebrew as a rib. In this legal framework, Yahweh acts as the suzerain, who formally indicts Israel, his vassal, for breaching the strict terms of their treaty. This blueprint maps the text's rigorous three-part cycle: sin, judgment, and restoration. Judgment functions as anthropogenic decreation, the literal unmaking of the world by human rebellion. To counter this, restoration operates as a cosmic recreation, orchestrated entirely by God. Hosea delivers this lawsuit as an axis mundi, a vertical mediator between heaven and earth, whose own life and broken home physically embody the decrees of the divine court. To understand the mechanics of this book, we must analyze how God uses legal, marital, and economic structures to absorb the cost of rebellion through a scandalous act of divine kenosis. Before we can examine the judgment, we have to precisely define Israel's core failure, an epistemological and relational fracture. The Hebrew text identifies the missing element as da'at Elohim, translated as the knowledge of God. The Hebrew word yada represents experiential, covenantal intimacy. Lacking this intimacy, Israel also lacks hesed, the loyal, covenant-keeping action required by the treaty. In place of hesed, the nation adopted a purely transactional mindset, treating their relationship with their creator like a commercial exchange. The ultimate insult occurs when Israel falsely attributes Yahweh's covenant gifts, the grain, the wine, and the oil, to the Canaanite fertility god Baal. Because this betrayal is a failure of intimacy, the covenant requires a systemic, relational rebuild. This rebuild begins with the opening sign act of chapter 1, where God commands Hosea to marry Gomer, a woman characterized by ongoing unfaithfulness. The prophet's deep personal and public humiliation serves as a direct earthly echo of God's own cosmic humiliation. This lived reality intensifies with the birth of Hosea's first child, a son named Jezreel, which translates to God scatters. The name acts as a death sentence for the current kingdom, while carrying a deliberate double edge that hints at a future re-sowing of the land. Next comes a daughter named Lo Ruama, translating to no pity or no mercy. With this name, God is publicly and legally revoking his core merciful attributes, the very traits established at Sinai in Exodus 34. Finally, Gomer bears a third child, a son named Lo Ami, which translates to not my people. Lo Ami represents the absolute nadir of the text, the exact word-for-word reversal of the foundational Sinai covenant formula. In the original Hebrew, God tells Israel, "I am not your God," using a phrase that literally translates to, "I am not Ehyeh." He is effectively unnaming himself as the great I Am of the Exodus. This sequence of walking prophecies enacts a total ontological divorce. The God who brought them out of Egypt is formally declaring that he is no longer present for them. Because the Old Covenant is legally dead, Yahweh cannot fix the relationship by simply enforcing the old rules. In chapter 2, God promises to change Israel's fundamental covenant vocabulary. This diagram illustrates the change. God rejects the term Baali, meaning my master. This represented a transactional, rigid, hierarchical dynamic. He replaces it with Ishi, meaning my husband. This term implies true mystical union and deep intimacy. The architectural shift of the book goes even further in chapter 11, moving past the metaphor of a betrayed husband to a heartbroken parent. God remembers Israel as a toddler he taught to walk and fed by hand, replacing legal reciprocity with deep parental pathos. Yahweh must unilaterally move the relationship from transactional compliance to radical dependence, because Israel is completely spiritually bankrupt and unable to initiate repair. What is the exact physical mechanism Yahweh uses to absorb the cost of this spiritual bankruptcy? In chapter 3, Hosea is commanded to enact divine kenosis by returning to the slave market to repurchase his unfaithful wife. To see how this cost is absorbed, we examine the exact redemption price. The ledger's first line item is 15 shekels of silver. The second half is 1.5 homers of barley. In the ancient economy, this equates to roughly 30 shekels. The legal context is devastating. 30 shekels was half the price of a living slave, the exact valuation of a dead or gored slave. The use of barley adds immense sociological weight. Known as the cheap grain of the poor and as animal fodder, it underscores Gomer's deep humiliation. This grain connects to a canonical law. In Numbers 5, the jealousy offering for a suspected adulteress legally demands the use of barley flour. By paying the contemptible price of a dead slave with animal fodder, the transaction proves God is willing to absorb the public scandal and personal cost required to redeem an entirely unworthy bride. Returning to the structure of the suzerainty treaty lawsuit, we clearly see that anthropogenic decreation was not God's final decree. Because God paid the slave price and absorbed the legal debt, he earned the right to reverse the damage Israel inflicted upon itself. The walking prophecies of chapter 1 are dynamically renamed. Not my people is declared my people. No mercy is renamed mercy. And Jezreel's meaning shifts entirely, from a threat that God scatters to a promise that God sows. This is the ultimate definition of divine kenosis, Yahweh embracing the foolishness of sacrificing his own dignity for a bankrupt nation. The restoration in Hosea is creatio ex veter, miraculous new creation brought forth directly out of the ashes of the old.